Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the Telerik DevCraft Q1 2015 release webinar, and we have lots and lots of awesome things to show you. Now, before we jump in though, I want to take a second to talk about Telerik DevCraft. We at Telerik make lots of different UI controls and frameworks across multiple platforms, but it is not surprising that DevCraft continues to be our most popular UI suite. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say it is the most complete and rich toolbox for any .NET developer that enables you to build amazing apps across any platform, web, desktop, or mobile. We know how important DevCraft is to you, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us for this webinar. The last I checked, just before we started, there are over 3,000 of you on this call. So thank you so much for all your love over the years. Now, we are here today to unpack DevCraft Q1 2015 release, and honestly, it's a lot. Now, there are about 16 to 17 different products that make up the DevCraft collection, and right in this webinar over the next 1 hour, you're possibly going to look at a dozen of our products across multiple technologies. And we are here to break it down for you to have an honest developer conversation as to what features you should be looking for in every one of our products. Now, there is one thing I want to mention before we start. Maybe you're just using 1 or 2 products out of our DevCraft collection. But hear us out. It's going to be a very quick show and tell over the next hour. But all of these enhancements that we're bringing to our products, it's going to get you thinking. That awkward business process, that one customer story that you never thought you had the right tools for, maybe now we have features that enable you to deliver such solutions. The way I see it, DevCraft quarterly releases are like Christmas mornings for .NET developers. So let's open our present boxes. Now, because we have so much to cover today, we actually have 3 of us on this webinar. 2 really handsome faces, 1 not so much. So we have Michael Crumb from Alabama, Ed Charbonneau from Kentucky, and yours truly, Sam Basu from Pennsylvania. And yes, I get a lot of snow where I live. I can't wait for spring and summer. You also have our Twitter handles, so you can get hold of us right after the webinar. Now, let's take a look at what's on our plate and how we're going to cover this content. Michael is going to come on first, and it's not every day that we get to launch brand new products. Michael has got one today in the report server. He's going to talk about some updates to document processing, brand new Xamarin controls if you're into cross-platform mobile development, Just Code preview, and loads of other .NET goodies. Now next up will be Ed. Ed's a hardcore web guy and he loves his responsiveness, so it's only apt that he talks about all things that are new in the UI for ASP.NET Ajax suite. He'll talk about the new Client Export Manager, the new Bootstrap skin, the navigation control, the lightweight rendering, everything that you need to build modern web applications. And finally, if these 2 guys leave enough time for me at the end, I'm going to come on and talk about Windows. What's next for Windows Universal Apps and what are we doing about it? I'll talk about some brand new Visual Studio templates across most of our products that jumpstart your app development experience. And I'll continue from where Ed left off with the responsiveness and talk about what's new for ASP.NET MVC developers. So overall, we're going to talk about lots of new features in Telerik DevCraft that enable you to build the next generation of amazing apps. Well now, there's Boromir from Lord of the Rings, and he had said, one simply does not walk into Mordor. Well, in today's age, what's a webinar without some cool prizes? So, stay with us till the end, and just for showing up, you're eligible to win these amazing prizes. An Xbox One, a Nokia Lumia 930, and an iPhone 6. Now we know exactly how painful our carriers can be, so the Lumia and the iPhone 6 are actually unlocked, so you can use them anywhere in the world. Now, the other thing we really like during our webinars is all the questions we get. Yes, it gets overwhelming with just how many we get, but we still love it. In fact, this time we will do a Google Hangouts later on just to answer all your questions. Michael will talk about it. So, keep the questions coming in the question panel, and at the end of the day, the person with the best question gets to take home a Microsoft Band. These things have been out of stock and it's really hard to get your hands on one, but we have one with your name on it. And finally, before we begin, I want to talk about Telerik Next. This is a huge conference that we're putting together in May at the heart of Boston. Grant Imahara from Mythbusters is going to be keynoting. How cool is that? You get workshops, you get 50 plus sessions from Telerik advocates, engineers, and industry experts. So go convince your boss that you have to be at Telerik Next. Find out more at teleriknext.com and come join us in Boston. Now, to start off our day, I give you the brilliant Michael Crump.
Thank you, Sam. Hello and welcome again to the Telerik DevTools Q1 2015 webinar. In this session, we'll cover a brand new product called Report Server and talk about several new components added to our Xamarin suite. I'll also talk about what is new in our document processing library and wrap up with a new version of Just Code built on top of Roslyn for Visual Studio 2015. Let's get started. As a quick introduction, my name is Michael Crump. I'm a Microsoft MVP and I work at Telerik as a developer advocate. You can find me on Twitter at mbcrump or check out my personal blog at michaelcrump.net. We also have a couple of Telerik blogs covering a variety of our products, as well as industry news that can be found at blogs.telerik.com and developer.telerik.com. Today we were introducing a brand new product called Report Server. With Telerik Report Server, you have a single place for storing, managing, and viewing reports in a user-friendly way. This product is currently in a community preview state, but already offers many features that our customers have requested. Let's take a look at them now. Some of the features included in the preview are: only registered users can access reports. We are currently using Forms authentication, but have plans to add Windows authentication as well. Support for user roles and permission levels is also in the works. Through the web interface, it enables business users to store, manage, and view reports in a user-friendly way. With built-in version and history tracking, you are always protected from accidental mistakes when managing reports. Users can keep track of the different versions and revert to an older version if needed. The built-in caching functionality helps multiple users load the same report faster. It also leverages the processing engine of Telerik Reporting. The Report Server provides you with a complete toolset for creating reports, as well as optimized performance when working with large sets of data. Whether accessed via a phone, tablet, or PC, the Reports Management app will always provide a user experience tailored for whatever the specific screen size is. Enough talk, let's see this in action. To get started working with the Report Server, make sure you go to telerik.com/report server. You can also find this page by going to Products and then Report Server. Once you're there, make sure you're logged into your account and then click on the Try Now button. This is going to download a zip file that's going to contain all the files that you're going to need in order to get started working with the Report Server. Let's take a look at the zip file now. I've went ahead and extracted the zip file, and you can see that we have a folder called Report Designer. This is going to allow you to create new reports or modify existing ones. We have telerik.reportserver.web, which will actually add to IIS as an application. We have the Report Server Manual, which shows you step-by-step how to get set up with IIS and using the Report Server, as well as some of the features. And then we have the end user license agreement. So I've went ahead and I've copied telerik.reportserver.web to my C drive, inetpub, www root. You can see it's located here. The next thing that I'm going to want to do is go ahead and open up IIS and add an application. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Sites and Default Website. And you can simply right click and select Add Application, and you're just going to simply point to that folder that I just mentioned. As you can see, I've already set mine up and I just gave it the name of Telerik Report Server. And here's obviously the folders that we just looked at just a moment ago. Now that we've done that, I'm going to simply navigate out to localhost Telerik Report Server, or you can simply browse to it through IIS. It's going to automatically bring you to this page, which is your login page. So in order to use the Telerik Report Server, you're going to need to create an account. So you can click on the Sign Up button and fill out the following information and register for an account. I've already got an account, so I'm just going to use that one, and I'm just going to go ahead and log in. So once I'm logged in, you can see this is the actual dashboard. So I'm going to take it from the very top. You're going to see the button called Configuration. By default, it uses the file system, a storage type, to store all of your reports. And this is actually going to the base path of just called data. In our C drive, inetpub, www root, we had Telerik Report Server.web. You can see that it created this folder called data. This is where it stores all of the different reports and their metadata. You also have the option to use Microsoft SQL Server as well as Redis. Reports is where you're going to do primarily your viewing of reports, adding reports, and just managing reports in general. There's also a categories folder, and this categories folder is where you're going to add new categories. So I've went ahead and I've added just a couple of categories just to start with. You'll see that there's two buttons here, one called scheduling and the other one called users. Scheduling for this release is grayed out, but it's coming in a future version, and it's going to allow you the ability to schedule report processing and or delivery. For users, it's also coming in a future version, and it's going to allow you to define different privileges for different users. So like with the ability to use different login providers such as Active Directory, user accounts, and so forth. And then the last button that you'll see on the screen is just simply called Data Connections. Data Connections is the centralized place where you can manage connection strings of your report's data sources. We'll look at this more in depth in just a moment. Let's go ahead and switch back to reports. You can see I've went ahead and I've added in 4 different reports. Let's take the employee sales summary for example. In employees sales summary, you can see that at the very top I have the ability to add a new report. I can view the selected report, upload a brand new revision to the report, or edit to download the report. I can copy it as well as delete it. I can also add this as a favorite if I would like by just clicking on the star, and I can preview the report by either clicking on it here or clicking on this button. So now that the preview has been loaded, you can see there's several options up at the top. So if we had more than one page, obviously you could navigate through those pages. You can refresh. If you would like to, you can click on this button to toggle print preview. There's also the ability to export this data out to a variety of different formats. I can click this button to print it. Obviously we can toggle some parameters here. We can zoom in, we can zoom out, or we can toggle the full page and page width. Back on the report screen, I still have selected the employee sales summary. On the employee sales summary, you can see that there is history, and it keeps track every time you add a new revision to the report. So in this example, you can see there's been a couple of changes here. There's obviously a button where you can revert back, as well as if you would like to preview that report at that certain instance in time. Okay, now I'd like to take a look at the data connections. So I'm going to click on data, which is going to bring us to the data connections. And you can see that I've already went ahead and I've added in a data provider, and this is just a SQL client data provider. And I went ahead and added in a connection string. And from this menu, you can obviously add a new one, you can edit, or you can copy this existing one, or you can delete it. So for the Telerik report server, we recommend that you use a named connection string in your Telerik report file. And in this report, if I select configure, you can see that it's using existing data connection called SQL. So this data connection that's called SQL may point to a test server that's on my local machine, whereas inside of my data connections, I could come into this screen and I could select edit, and here again it's set to local, but say my production database is on another server, I could simply just add in that name here and then select save, and I wouldn't have to actually modify the report that I've already uploaded inside of reports. We're going to switch gears now and take a look at some of the new stuff in Xamarin. So we're going to start with the list view component. It is for Xamarin wrappers and includes all the essential features associated with the list view scenario. Some of the features included in this release are: the list view supports stacked and wrapped layouts. It ships with pull to refresh functionality out of the box, mirroring the expected behavior for in-app content update. The items load on top of the feed by pulling down from the top of the list. In addition to the built-in UI virtualization, the control supports load on demand. This optimizes the initial loading of the app, and the new items are loaded before the user reaches the bottom of the list view. List view also animates the way items appear on the screen as the end user scrolls the items up or down. It supports several animations such as scale, fade in, slide in, or a combination of these. And there's also many more features that I don't have time to talk about. The slide drawer includes wrappers for native iOS and Android controls. It extends the popular slide out design pattern, which is mainly associated with navigational purposes. The control allows developers to embed any content inside the sliding panel, from text to icons to sliders and filters. The control is highly customizable and slides in from all four sides of the screen. Various effects and transition modes come out of the box. Some of them include push, reveal, reverse slide out, slide along, and the others listed on the screen. Telerik Data Source is a non-UI component that consumes raw data and processes the data operations for controls such as list view and chart. The control performs sorting, filtering, and grouping, saving developers time and efforts to build the functionality themselves. The Xamarin.iOS data source can consume various data from arrays with simple items and business objects to dictionaries coming from various sources, such as web services that return data in a JSON format. You can assign several data controls to a single data source instance, allowing the selected items of the data controls to be synchronized. Now that we've taken a look at what's included in Q1, let's see where each of them fits in. Right now, we are in the process of bringing data source, list view, and slide drawer to Xamarin.Forms. You'll see that the list view for Xamarin.iOS wrappers is in beta, with Q1 of the slide drawer is in beta for Xamarin.Android. Everything else is official. Let's go ahead and jump into a demo that showcases UI for Xamarin. I am working with Xamarin inside of Visual Studio 2013. You are certainly free to use Telerik UI for Xamarin with Xamarin Studio if you wish. I've created a simple iOS application that works with the controls mentioned in the slides, but you can also use them with Android. So taking a look at the Solution Explorer, I have one solution added, and then I've got two projects, one called List View and another one called Side Drawer. Inside of the list view, I've added a reference to telerik.xamarin.ios. So to keep things simple for this first sample, I'm going to be doing all the work inside of the app delegate. Inside of the app delegate, you can see that I've added a using statement for Telerik UI, as well as a using statement for core graphics in the Objective-C runtime. I'm not going to go over the boilerplate code that ships with the Xamarin templates, but I am going to mention that I have went ahead and created a view controller class, and that I've instantiated it as well as set the root view controller to main, which is defined here. Taking a look at the view controller, you can see that the base class is UI view controller, and to kick things off, I have instantiated a TK list view and just given it the name of list view. I've created an array of strings with all of the advocates that's currently at Telerik, and as well as I'm using the TK data source for the very first time and just giving it the name of data source, declaring a new TK data source and passing in that array of strings. I'm going to set the frame to this.view.bounds as well as the auto resizing mask. I'm going to set the weak data source to just data source. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on two very powerful properties. One that's going to allow multiple selections, so the user will be able to select more than one user. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to allow them to reorder the cells if they wish. Finally, I'm going to add this to this.view.addSubview, and I'm just going to pass in my list view. So let's run this application, and I'm going to VNC over to my Mac and let you see this application. That list of developer advocates is now showing. Obviously, you can select as many of them as you would like to, and there is also the ability to reorder. Now, don't let this demo make you think that is all that there is to this control, as it is extremely powerful. And what I would encourage you to do, to check out the documentation, and I've listed the documentation here. It's just simply at docs.telerik.com, and you can navigate out to the wrappers for iOS or for Android, and then go to list view and take a look at your different options here. If you download the source to this solution, then you'll also get a more advanced sample. Let's take a look now very quickly at the side drawer. Again, the same thing as before. We've added a reference to telerik.xamarin.ios, and inside of my app delegate, I'm going to scroll down to my code on the finished launching, and you can see that I have again declared a view controller, and I have set my TK side drawer controller and just given it the name of side drawer controller equals new TK side drawer controller, passing in main, and I'm setting my root view controller this time to the side drawer controller. If I scroll down to my view controller, you can see again my base class is UI view controller. I went ahead and set up a primary section as well as a label section. This is going to display the data in my side drawer, and then I've also set up another one called side drawer. And in my view did load, I'm going to go ahead and use a UI image view, and I'm going to set a background image here and add that to my sub view. Again, I'm going to add a navigation bar and give it a navigation item. When I show the side drawer, I'm going to just use a menu.png, which is going to be a hamburger type of icon, and I'm going to set the left bar button item to the show side drawer. I'm going to set up my items and then set the this.view.add subview to navbar, and here for the primary section I've just named this controls, and I've added in all of these items. I've added another one here for our labels called help, and then I've just added in a couple of items here as well. Finally, I'm going to wrap up with this.sideDrawer equals tk sideDrawer dot find sideDrawer, and then pass in this, and then I'm going to add each one of these sections. Let's go ahead and run this, and here is the side drawer, and I have a button up at the top. You can click on it, and as you can see, there's the animation as it slides out, and here is obviously the data that we had typed in before. So you can select one of them. You can navigate to a different view controller if you would like. You can also pull that menu out by just dragging, and there's also several other ways that you can define the side drawer. Let's go ahead and jump back to the slides. So what's new in the document processing library? So PDF processing is now official. This enables your applications to process PDF files without another third-party library installed. Users are then able to create, load, and modify PDF documents. Spreads processing library, which enables seamless manipulation of spreadsheet files, now integrates with Grid View for WPF and Silverlight with minimal effort. Words processing and PDF processing now enable seamless conversion of simple docx, RTF, HTML documents to PDF. We have a brand new version of Just Code built from the ground up specifically for Visual Studio 2015. It is built on top of the Roslyn engine to provide additional capabilities, including support for C# 6.0. The new Just Code is in preview, so give it a try and leave your feedback, questions, or suggestions in the feedback portal. So I have several resources that I'm going to wrap up with. As you can see, you can find all of this on the DevCraft landing page at telerik.com/devcraft. We have documentation, support, and feedback that we would love for you to provide. And as always, trial downloads of all the products is available at justtelerik.com. I'm going to go ahead and turn the stage over to Ed to talk about ASP.NET. Ed?
Thanks, Michael. Hello, and welcome everyone. I can't wait to tell you all about what's new in UI for ASP.NET Ajax. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Ed Charbonneau, and I'm a developer advocate for Telerik. You can follow me on Twitter, and make sure you stop by developer.telerik.com and see what I've been writing about. So let's talk about all the cool new features and controls in this release, and then we'll dig into some code and demos. First, I'm excited because I love responsive web design, and I get to tell you about 2 new additions that will help you build slick responsive apps. We've added an all-new Bootstrap theme, so now you can work seamlessly with the Telerik UI and Bootstrap. There's also the brand new RAD navigation. This control will Take all of the frustration out of building complex menus in your next app. And if you haven't gotten familiar with the rad page layout control yet, make sure you visit demos.telerik.com to see the new demo that we've put together. Also, the rad image gallery now supports gestures, giving mobile and touch devices a first-class user experience. With this release, we introduce lightweight rendering for a number of our popular controls, like grid, async upload, button, input, org chart, and rating. And finally, there's the Rad Client Export Manager. This is a powerful control that lets you export whole pages, specific HTML elements, and even server-side controls to image, PDF, and SVG formats. Alright, I'm going to fire up Visual Studio now and show you some demos. So let's try out some of the new responsive features I talked about earlier, like the Bootstrap theme. Okay, I'm going to jump into Visual Studio now, and I'm going to build a login page using the new Bootstrap skin and Bootstrap. So I've started with a Bootstrap responsive layout, you can see here, and I've added some Bootstrap panel elements. And inside of our form, we have some Telerik components to provide input, like the rad text box for email and password, and then a rad drop-down list for age selection. And then I'm using a standard ASP.NET checkbox to remember credentials. And then I'm using some rad buttons for cancel and login. So let's load this up in the browser and see how it looks. So as you can see here, there's not a whole lot going on. It's a pretty basic form. There's not any real style to it. So let's go back into Visual Studio and see if we can make this look better. I'm going to start by adding some style to the login panel, and I'll do that using the Bootstrap framework. I'm going to come up to our panel element and give it a new class of panel primary. What panel primary is going to do is it's going to give us a nice blue theme for our login box. Let's go back to the browser and refresh and see what the change looks like. So that's pretty cool. You can see we've got a nice blue tone here and a nice outline around our box. But our input elements really haven't changed at all. So we need to do something to make those look better. And we can do that using the Telerik Bootstrap skin. So let's go back to our application and see how to do that. So if we go to our web config file, and underneath of the skin setting, you can see we have a default value here. Let's go ahead and change this to Bootstrap. And I'm going to save this and restart the application. Alright, you can see that our inputs have the Bootstrap skin. And what's really nice about this is when I open up the drop-down, you can see that the selected item has been highlighted with the same color blue that our panel has. Our buttons have the theme as well. One more really cool feature here is how we can make minor adjustments to change the user experience. Let me show you what I mean. If we were on this page, the primary action would be to log in. So that button should be a little bit brighter and draw a little more attention than other things on the form. Let me show you what we can do. I'm going to come back to my code, and on the login button, I'm going to add a new class. And this is a class that comes with the Bootstrap skin. And I'm going to give it a class of RB primary button. I'm going to save that and then go back to the browser and refresh. Now we have a nice bright blue login button, so the user can immediately tell where they're supposed to click. And that shows you how the Bootstrap skin and Bootstrap can be used together to make a seamless user interface. Now let's move on to lightweight rendering. Lightweight rendering uses much less markup to create controls. It uses semantic HTML and CSS3, and in some cases we replace images with font-based images. This makes our controls much easier to customize and gives us a lot better performance. So let's jump back to the Bootstrap demo, and I'll show you how this can help us. So here we have the login page we created earlier using the Bootstrap skin. And right now we're using classic rendering mode. And what I'd like to do is take these input boxes and make them stretch to 100% width of the panel. So I'm going to open Chrome Developer Tools by right-clicking on the input and choosing Inspect Element. And you'll notice that there's an inline style of 160 pixels width set for this input box. Now, since this is an inline style, if I try to create a new width using CSS, the inline style is just going to override that. So let's see how lightweight rendering can help us here. I'm going to open Visual Studio and go to the web config file. And I'm going to add a new setting here. This setting is going to configure our render mode for the entire application. And I'm going to set the value to auto. But there's several other options we could choose here, like classic, lightweight, or mobile. But by choosing auto, we're going to let the application decide what rendering mode to use based on what kind of browser is visiting our site. So now I'm going to save this change and restart the application. Let's use our developer tools again to inspect that input box. And we can see that the inline style is gone. And now we just have one rad input CSS class controlling the style for this input. Now this is something that we can override and give it our own style. Let's go ahead and set the width to 100%. We'll do that by jumping back into Visual Studio. And at the top of our page, we'll create a new style tag. Now normally you'd link off to a style sheet, but we're just doing a demo, so I'll show you here. Inside the style tag, I'll set our rad input to 100% width. Now let's save this and refresh the browser and see if that takes effect. There we go. How easy was that? Now we have our input box stretching the entire width of the panel. Let's go ahead and do the same for our dropdown. Let's go ahead and give it a quick inspect. And you can see there's one class here, rad dropdown list underscore bootstrap. We'll go ahead and use that and do the same thing that we did with the input box. Let's save and refresh again. And now our drop-down box stretches the whole width as well. Now we should have a nice fluid screen when we expand and contract our browser. So we saw how lightweight rendering can make styling our pages much easier. Let's look at the new navigation component that makes putting navigation on a responsive website much easier. I've created a lot of responsive apps, and one of the biggest challenges I found was creating large menus, especially ones with deep navigation structures like this one, that would fit any screen size. So let's see how the rad navigation control responds when we resize the browser. So I'm just going to grab the right-hand edge and bring it to the left. And as I move it, you'll notice the menu items disappear. But that's okay, they're not being removed from the user's access. They're actually being put underneath this menu icon. So if we click here, we'll open up a tray, and we can still access all of our menu items. This is great for complex menus, and it works even on smaller mobile devices. You'll notice as I keep moving to the left, now all of the menu items are gone, but they're all easily accessible underneath the tray. So let's jump over to Visual Studio and see the code that makes this work. So the code shows just how impressive the rad navigation control is, because there's not actually a lot of markup to make this work. You can see that we've got some nested nodes. Each of these is a menu item, and they could be nested multiple nodes deep. And then we just have our navigation elements, and that's it. The navigation control handles the rest of the responsive behaviors. And there's a lot more responsive controls in the UI for ASP.NET Ajax, so make sure you stop by Telerik.com and check out some more of our demos. So I've talked about getting content on every screen size, and now I'm going to talk about getting content off your screen with the Client Export Manager. The Client Export Manager provides you with a what you see is what you get export experience. It can be used to export an entire screen like this dashboard, or just what you need like this chart control. And it has so many uses. Since the Client Export Manager exports to PDF, it's great for sharing reports. Content can also be exported to an image, so it could be embedded in presentations or saved for auditing purposes. An auditor might prefer or even request reports in a format that can't be manipulated, and an image solves that problem. So let's go over to Visual Studio and see how the Client Export Manager works. So I have a project that will show you just how powerful the Client Export Manager is. In this project, the user will be able to create a certificate which they'll be able to export using the Client Export Manager to PDF or to image so they can print or share their certificate with other people. On this page, we have a certificate, and it's made up of HTML, CSS, and images. At the bottom, we have an Export to PDF and Export to Image button. I'm going to go ahead and click the Export to Image button. Let's see what it does. Now notice I was prompted to download an image. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And there's an exact duplicate of what was on the screen. Now notice the two buttons are missing. That's because those weren't included in the export. Let's go back and export to PDF now. And I'm going to open this up. And you might think for a minute that this is just an image captured and put in a PDF. But if you look, we can actually select the text in here. So let's take a look at the code and see how this works. You'll notice on the page we have a RAD Client Export Manager, and then we have a certificate that's made up of different components. It has a CSS class to give it some style, and we've applied a background image. And then there's several other elements that just make up the content. Below that we have our buttons. And notice the onClient clicked event. We're handling that with the onExportPDF method. Because we're working on the client, we'll be using some JavaScript. Our onExportPDF method is actually pretty simple. First, we find our Client Export Manager. Next, we select the HTML element that we want to export. This could be an entire page or just one control. And finally, we get the instance of our export manager and call the export to PDF method. And we pass in the element that we want to export. That'll prompt the user to download the PDF or the image. And it's really as simple as adding a Client Export Manager to your page and connecting a few buttons to the Export PDF or Export Image methods. So let's review what we've covered. We have brand new responsive features like the Bootstrap theme that lets you work seamlessly with the Telerik UI and Bootstrap. Then there was the new navigation control. The navigation control makes complex and deeply nested menus possible on any device size. We also saw how to enable lightweight rendering for improved markup, easier customization, and better performance. And finally, we saw how the Client Export Manager enables us to take content out of the browser for sharing, reporting, and more. So I'm going to wrap up with just a few resources. Make sure you stop by and see what's new in Telerik UI for ASP.NET Ajax. Then make sure you visit our responsive web demos and see how our controls work on your device. That does it for me. I'm going to bring up Sam Basu next. Sam, over to you.
All right, thank you, Ed. Now, I do appreciate these two guys leaving some time for my last section because I do have some really exciting things to show you. I'm calling this Windows and the Modern Web. Let's talk about Windows and where we're headed with Windows 10. What can you do with Windows Universal Apps today, and what's the future like? Now, Ed already talked quite a bit about the responsive web, but there is still more, especially if you're an ASP.NET MVC developer. So let's talk about all the tooling that helps you build the next generation of amazing apps that just run everywhere. Once again, I'm Sam Basu, and you can find me online on Twitter or on my personal blog. Better still, hit up Telerik Developer Network, where a lot of us are blogging about solid technical content. Ready? Let's jump in. Now, the world of Microsoft and Windows as we know it is going through an amazing transformation. By now, we have all seen what Windows 10 looks like. It's coming later in this year, and it's a big deal, because it represents the convergence of every operating system that Microsoft makes. It's that one Windows dream, the one Windows which runs on every device, starting from your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, your phone, and even Xbox. Now, a while back, Microsoft had introduced us to this concept of Windows Universal Apps, where you share not just business logic, but even UI components towards writing apps that run seamlessly on Windows and Windows Phone. We have now heard the message loud and clear. Windows Universal Apps is the way forward. If you're writing Universal Apps today, you can be guaranteed that they're going to run just fine when Windows 10 hits. There are other exciting things going on, like the core of our beloved .NET framework going open source, the heavy investments towards IoT, and we have seen what the holographic future looks like with HoloLens. I just think it's a great time to be a .NET developer. So, what can Telerik do for you, the Windows developer? Well, as you know, we have a suite called the Telerik UI for Windows Universal. This is a collection of highly performant native universal controls that run on Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1. It gets you that great polished UI out of the box. Now, in line with the importance of Windows Universal Apps going forward, we are putting a lot more investment in the Telerik UI for Windows Universal suite. And this quarter, you have 4 brand new controls: the list view, the side drawer, the looping list, and the numeric box. Now, 2 of these controls, the list view and the side drawer, are really big deals because they provide you with that fundamental app building canvas. Also, we don't live in a silo, and chances are, if you're a Windows developer, you may want to take your app cross-platform, and that could mean native apps for iOS and Android, or you could be using Xamarin to cross-compile your apps to other platforms. No matter which approach you choose, Telerik has a UI suite to help you out, be it native UI for iOS or Android, or even UI for Xamarin. The good news is, all of these new controls that you're seeing with Windows Universal are going to make their way into every other UI suite with the exact same API signatures. So, learn it once and write it everywhere. Let's take a closer look at these new Windows Universal controls. And we start with the list view control. Now, this is one of those fundamental UI pieces because everyone needs to display a list of something in their apps, right? Now, this is not your mom and pop list view. It's on steroids. It's loaded with features and renders beautifully across Windows 8 and Windows Phone devices. It's got advanced features like loading on demand and UI virtualization, which means you can bind the list view to hundreds and even thousands of items in your data collection. It's still going to be super responsive, and that's because it's smart in the way it binds the data before the UI rendering happens. The list view supports popular features like pull down to refresh and touch gestures like swipe to the left or the right, most commonly used to delete or mark items. The list view control has full templating support, which means you can render your collection of items anyhow you want. Plus, you gain features like filtering, grouping, or sorting. In all, this should be the only list view control you ever need to look for all of your Windows apps. Next up is the side drawer control. And again, this is one of those fundamental UI controls which allows you to organize everything that you want to present in your app. Now, the hamburger menu is very popular on the web, and it is actually rumored to play a big part in Windows 10. With the side drawer control, you're actually just one step ahead by already having it in your Universal apps. It is a navigational control, and there is a slide-out panel as you expect. So there is a main content, and there is a slide-out content. These are just placeholders, and you can put whatever you want in them. The side drawer comes pre-built with 4 different opening directions and several open-close animations that control how the slide-out panel shows up and disappears. You'll have fun with it. Next up is the looping list control. This is similar to the list view in terms of features, but it's really customized for repeating data, like the days of a week. The looping list control utilizes internal UI virtualization for smooth performance. And once you have scrolled to the very last item in your data collection, it simply loops back to the very first one. The looping list allows you to customize the appearance of every item in your collection through the use of templates, and you can lay down the control either horizontally or vertically. As you scroll, you also get inertia animations, and the items snap into place once the scrolling stops. It's pretty slick. Alright, so last, but definitely not the least, is the numeric box. This is a simple control which was always a part of our Windows Phone Silverlight controls, and it's just making its way into the Universal Suite. It is a simple numeric up-down control, but you get to predefine a range of values. You also get advanced formatting features like units of measurement, and you can also customize the step declaration, which is the increment or the decrement factor as the user hits the plus or the minus sign. Tired of slides, are we? Let's jump into some demos. So I'm in Visual Studio here, and I have the latest bits installed for Telerik UI for Windows Universal. You can get those bits directly from their website or through the Telerik control panel. Now, the project I'm going to show you is the Quick Solution Framework, which is actually a part of your installation, so you can take a look at these and play with them anytime. We have demos for every one of our controls, including Windows Phone 8.1 and Windows 8.1 variants. And in every one of these projects, if you look at my references, I do have the Telerik core and the Telerik XAML UI primitives. So let's fire this up. Now this guy is an universal app, but we are seeing it running on Windows 8.1. Let's take a look at the list view and the side drawer controls. I'm sure the remaining two are simple enough for you to figure out. We start with the list view, and then let's go into the first look. So what you see here is the list view in action. You can customize the look and feel of every one of these items through easy templates. And of course, you get very smooth scrolling. Now, you can switch up the layout just by switching up how the list view wraps its data. And of course, you can put filters on the list view. So back in Visual Studio, let me show you how simple the code looks like. You simply start off saying Telerik rad list view, and that's all. The rest is just setting up all the properties through standard XAML. You'll notice that we have two list views here, one for the wrap and one for the list. Notice how we are feeding the same exact data to both the list views using the standard item source property. However, the look and feel of each of the list views is different, and that's controlled partly with the layout definition. Notice how the item widths are different, but also the item template. This guy is a static resource and it takes in a data template. So we have a list item template and we have a wrap item template. These are standard data templates, and you can feed whatever you want inside those data templates that customizes the look and feel of every one of your items. That's all it takes, and you gain all of the features of the list view out of the box. Back in our app, now let's look at the side drawer. Let's go into the first look. Alright, so here we have a side drawer demo. Notice that when I hit the hamburger menu, a slide out panel opens up, and this works exactly the same way between Windows 8.1 and Windows Phone 8.1. When I tap anywhere outside, it goes away. I will say though, these foods look more like lunch to me than breakfast, but I digress. So let me close this demo here, and let's go take a look at some custom content. Here, the slide out is actually on the right hand side, and when I hit the hamburger menu, you'll notice that we have some filtering options. The point is, it's just a placeholder and you can put whatever you want in it. Now, let's take a look at some configurable settings that come pre-built with the side drawer control. Let me go into settings here. Everything that you see here with the transitions are actually built-in animations. Normally, the slide out panel opens with a reveal, but you can change it to something like slide in on top. Notice how the main content now gets covered, or you can say scale down the main content. So just subtle differences. And also, the position of the slide out panel can be changed from top, left, right, and bottom. In this case, let me switch it to bottom and hit the hamburger. Notice the difference. So just more options for you. Now, back in Visual Studio, let me show you how simple the XAML markup looks like. You simply say Telerik primitives and write side drawer. Beyond that, it's just setting up properties. Notice the drawer button vertical alignment here being top and the drawer transition being push. These are the standard animations and the positions that we just looked at. Beyond that, the only two things you need to set on the side drawer is this main content and the drawer content. Now, as their name suggests, these are simply placeholders for the main content and the slide out panel. So you can quickly see how this simple control, the rad side drawer, can help you organize the entire navigation throughout your app for Windows Phone 8.1 and Windows 8.1. So that's all I have for the universal controls. Let's go back to the slides. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are some brand new Visual Studio templates that we're introducing. Now, it's not very often that we get to hit File New Project in Visual Studio, but if and when you do, we want to make sure you start off on your best foot forward. We want to get you to a great starting point from where you can build your amazing apps. So starting this quarter, we are introducing brand new templates for a wide variety of our suites. That includes ASP.NET Ajax Web Forms, MVC, WPF, Silverlight, WinForms, and many more. For the web frameworks, the big thing we're going to push is responsiveness, because your web apps simply should work on every device. And for your desktop apps, we want you to have templates that allow you to build apps with the most ubiquitous desktop look that's out there. and that's Microsoft Office. Now, if you're an ASP.NET developer writing web forms and you have Telerik UI for ASP.NET Ajax, starting from File New Project, you're met with the Telerik Project Configuration Wizard. Right in there, you see a project type which allows you to choose a responsive web application that simply works everywhere. Let me show you in just a second what that looks like. Now, if you're building your ASP.NET web applications using MVC, the Telerik Project Configuration Wizard will allow you to choose a project type between Standard, which is meant for desktop web applications, versus Mobile, which is really catered towards the mobile-first thinking. Now, you also know that the Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC Suite has lots of wrappers for Kendo UI, which is really our HTML5 JavaScript client-side framework. The Kendo UI release is coming up in 2 weeks, and along with that, you'll have an update to the Visual Studio extensions, and that will get you 2 more templates for ASP.NET MVC applications. This is the grid and the menu. These are the Kendo UI grids and the Kendo UI menus, which are all responsive and adaptive, and you can create those experiences right out of the box. Now, are you building desktop applications with WPF or WinForms? Well, the new templates show up in the Telerik Project Configuration Wizard as you do a File New Project. And now you can choose between project types of Word, Excel, or Outlook-inspired looks. These are pretty darn awesome. Let me show you some demos on how these templates look like. So, I'm back in Visual Studio and I'm doing ASP.NET Web Forms development. So if I do a File, New, and then Project, and if I pick the Telerik Web templates, the Telerik C# Web Forms application, this is where you're going to see the new responsive web application templates. I already have a project, so let me cancel out of this. Now, in this project that the template created, let me show you my Solution Explorer. If you look into the scripts folder, there is absolutely nothing, no bootstrap, no modernizer. The rest of it looks like a normal web forms application, but yet we will have responsiveness. Let me fire this up. So let me go debug and then start with our debugging. Boom, it comes up in my browser. It is running on localhost in my local IIS Express. So this is a boilerplate web application. Now, watch what happens when I resize this window. Notice how it starts to shrink, and then if I make it small enough, the menu on the left goes away. So you have pure responsiveness, and it's pretty slick. So back in Visual Studio, let me actually show you how this is working. It is squarely meant for those of you who do not like to mess with CSS and JavaScript frameworks like Bootstrap on the client side. This is being done purely with the help of Telerik controls, which are all server-side. So our Visual Studio template actually throws in a master page, which every other ASP.NET page kind of inherits of. And if you look closely at the master page, which you can obviously edit, we are using the Telerik RAD page layout. This is what Ed was talking about. It's purely a server-side control, and we are setting it up with things like rows and columns, but everything has special span tags, which are meant for large, medium, and small screen sizes. And with the device detection framework, we can recognize the browser's capabilities on the server side and then do our responsiveness and control the layout by adjusting the content and saving bandwidth. Okay, now let me switch gears and look at the ASP.NET MVC project template. So in Visual Studio, I went File, New, Project, choose Telerik Web, and then I went and chose the Telerik C# MVC web application. The very next step, you're going to see that project configuration wizard where you can pick whether it's a standard desktop web application or a mobile application. I chose mobile. Let me cancel out and look at my project. So if you look at my project structure, this is a very standard MVC application, but with the Telerik bits. Now if I look at the shared folder and the layout.cs.html, which is kind of like a master page for MVC, you'll notice some interesting things. Of course, we're using the HTML Kendo helpers, and this one here is rendering a mobile layout inside of which we have a tab strip. So now let me go ahead and run this. Start without debugging. And I already have my IE shrunk, and now you see the web application running. This is a standard ASP.NET MVC application, but you have the tab strip. This looks very much like a mobile first application, and it will load perfectly in any mobile browser. Now let me go back to my index page and start resizing this window. You notice that there is responsiveness out of the box. So if you're a web developer, we are trying to get you all the tools that you need to start building solid, modern, responsive web applications. Alright, so let me switch modes one last time, and now I have 2 Visual Studio projects open, both for WPF apps. Now if you remember, I told you all of our desktop Windows applications gain the Office-inspired templates, and these projects are created with just those templates. I haven't changed a line of code. So let me go ahead and run the first WPF application. And there you have it. Looks like Outlook, doesn't it? But this is actually a RAD list view. This is a RAD rich text box. So all of your Telerik controls are rendered with an Outlook theme. Let me go ahead and close this, and we can switch to the other WPF project. Let me go ahead and run this one. And boom! Looks like Word, doesn't it? Because that's the template we used. Now, these are all WPF applications, so all of these UI elements and buttons can have event handlers, or if you're doing an MVVM pattern, you can bind them to commands. So, more power to you, right? Let's head back to the slides. Alright, so let me share some news around Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC. As you guys know, this is a modern web development framework that includes wrappers for Kendo UI widgets. Now the Kendo UI release is coming up in 2 weeks, and you can expect a fair share of love out of that. You get brand new Visual Studio extensions and templates. Also, you get brand new controls and framework features. There is a new responsive panel. I'll show you that in just a second. Most of the Kendo UI widgets get enterprise features like print and export and better event handling. And then there's this rather cool view data scaffolding feature which MVC developers should love. Let's say you have a model in your MVC project and you want to display the data from your model in a Kendo UI grid. Well, now you can just right click and the scaffolding generates a controller that's tied to your model and a view that displays all of the data. How cool is that? Now, let me jump out to my browser for just 1 second. This is the homepage for Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC. You know how to find that. Now, when I click on the demos link, it launches this other web page which has all of our regular demos. But right at the top, you see the Q1 2015 beta demos. Let me go ahead and launch that. Now, there is one new control in here that I want to show you, and that's the responsive panel. Now, there is no bootstrapping going on here. This is just a vanilla Kendo UI widget. So here's a panel. There is a menu on the left-hand side and some content on the right. Watch what happens when I resize the window. If I make the window small enough, eventually you notice the menu vanish, and now you have a hamburger menu with a slide-out panel. How fun is that? Let me switch back to the slides for the last time, I promise. Now, if you're using Telerik UI for ASP.NET MVC to make mobile-first web applications, you have had this control called a split view, which really is catered towards the tablet or the desktop form factor. There's a menu on the left, and there's some content on the right-hand side. Well, now it works for phones as well. As the viewport gets squished, the menu kind of disappears into this hamburger icon with this slide-out panel. And also, you have the exact same functionality with the menu control. On a larger screen, the menu renders as drop-down lists. And as the screen size becomes smaller, it now becomes a hamburger icon with a slide-out menu. This is all now sounding very familiar, right? Responsiveness for the win. And finally, here are some of the features coming to the other Kendo UI widgets. You'll notice that there are updates to some very enterprise-friendly Kendo UI widgets, like the editor, the grid, the map, the scheduler, and so on. Check out that link for everything that's new. And now, I have spoken for way too long, so let me end things with some resources. I'm keeping it simple, 3 simple links that shows you what's new in this release for Telerik UI for Windows Universal, UI for ASP.NET Ajax, and UI for ASP.NET MVC. From those links, you can find the demos and all of the documentation. And finally, Telerik.com/DevCraft is the home for all things DevCraft. You can start there and dive into any of the products that make up the Telerik DevCraft suite. Alright, that's a wrap from me. You know where to find me online. I'm at SAMIDIP on Twitter. Now, hopefully this was fun for you, and you will see all the different things we're doing in DevCraft to empower you, the developer. I'm tired of talking. Let me hand it back to Michael to wrap things up. Michael?
Thank you, Sam. So far, we've talked about all kinds of things added to the Q1 2015 release. I thought I'd take a few minutes and tell you about all the things that we did not cover, as well as a few other important messages. So WinForms has released 4 new controls, such as Rad Linear Gauge, Rad Bullet Graph, Rad Diagram, and Rad Checkbox. So Rad Linear Gauge is a linear scale that can display multiple scales and ranges. Rad Bullet Graph combines the number of indicators as well as the data indicator into one control. Rad Diagram allows you to create diagramming and rich data visualization. You can also create org charts, flow, and process diagrams as an example. Rad Checked List Box is an enhanced control that allows you to do things such as data binding, visual formatting, sorting, grouping, filtering, and more. We also have new features in Rad Chart View that includes marked zones, new series, annotations, and more. We've also added new Visual Studio templates that help you jumpstart project development inspired by Microsoft Word and Outlook. WPF and Silverlight has added a brand new wizard control in its beta version. This is the component that will facilitate complex data entries by breaking them down into easy step-by-step UI for your end users. Rad Radio Menu appears as a contextual menu, popping in a circular form and containing multiple levels of items grouped by purpose. Just like WinForms, we've added new Visual Studio templates that help you jumpstart project development. Leverage the new Visual Studio project and report templates to build reports faster. Also included is our HTML5 viewer that provides built-in caching capabilities that decrease memory consumption and improve report loading time when multiple users are viewing the same report. Many other features have been added. You can deploy your JustMock test projects to TFS 2013 and TFS 2012 with no manual configurations for setting up your build environment. If your project uses Malf or Unity for dependency injection, you can now use the integration libraries that enable you to auto-mock dependencies when writing tests with just a few lines of code. The Entity Framework helper library enables you to create entire mock DB contexts objects with mock data for every DB set or IDB set, as well as arrange and assert methods on the DB context and DB set mocks. We're planning to hold 2 follow-up Tech Talks for the DevTools release. On March the 17th, if your questions weren't answered during the March 11th webinar, or if you have any follow-up questions, then join us for a live discussion. On March the 24th, we will be diving into more specific product and topics based on your questions. We will email everyone tomorrow with the links to the Tech Talks. We look forward to seeing you there. Also, Telerik Next is happening on May the 3rd through the 5th in Boston. This event includes a full-day workshop that includes web, desktop, and mobile. The conference starts on May the 4th and has 48+ sessions in which industry experts will share their knowledge on HTML5, .NET, JavaScript, mobile development, and much, much more. So go ahead and register now at teleriknext.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Again, trial downloads for all the products mentioned today are available on telerik.com. Also, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter at any time. We will now be taking a live Q&A to answer your questions. Please give us a few minutes to get ready. Thank you.